This is Keeping It Teacherish. Look, if you're new, I'm Patrice and I'm so glad you're here. Have you ever wondered if there was a way to manage behavior without the stickers, the toys, the points, the rewards, all the things, right? The gimmick, the lights, the smoke, all the things. Or do you feel like the majority of your day is simply classroom management? If that's you, this video is for you, okay? Listen to me. Today, I'm gonna tell you about how I use restorative practices in my classroom. I'm gonna actually share with you my real life behavior plan that I enforce every single day with my own students, as well as the growth that I have seen. I wanna help you to help your students to grow and not just behave well. So, you're gonna need to keep watching, because this is Keeping It Teacherish. Okay, so before we dive in too deep, I want to just kind of set the stage. My behavior plan does not rely on stickers, points, or individual rewards at all. Instead, it focuses on building relationships, fostering responsibility, and helping the students to learn from their actions, thus growing from the mistakes that they may make. So, no. Not every incident requires a long conversation, so I'm going to stop you right there. I know that's what we think when we hear restorative practices. Not at all. But I am going to show you how these practices can be practical, quick, and realistic, even for the busy classroom, okay? So let's get into it. A student misbehaves, and the first question that I ask them is, what is the expectation? What is my expectation of you in this moment, right? Like, what is the expectation? And usually what happens is that student goes to say what happened. They're not talking about the expectation because the expectation is clear. Everyone understands it. Now, if this is new for you and you have not spent time on like what are your expectations for the classroom and gone through like your procedures and all of those things, I'm going to link my video right here because you need to see that. That is a very important part of how this works well for you. Your expectations for your classroom need to be crystal clear so that when something happens or when someone is not following an expectation, you can require that of them. One of the things that I teach my students is I am going to inspect what I expect. Okay, so I'm going to be looking for you to follow the expectations. This is why they are here. These expectations help us to work well and for our classroom to run well. Okay, and so again, a student misbehaves, that's going to be the first question, which actually gets us into what happened. So a realistic approach for smaller incidents, instead of calling out or like a mild disruption, like someone's blurting out in class, you can easily say to them, what's the expectation, right? I have students in my classroom that they like to hear themselves speak. I mean, it just is what it is. And so every time, whether there is a question or not, they give commentary. My students have learned the definition of the word commentary in my classroom because I don't need you to narrate your life. I'm not asking for that. Just listen, okay? And so in those moments, I have a student who will blurt out whatever. It's not even answering questions. We'll blurt out whatever. And if I look at them and say, no, what's the expectation in this moment? They immediately self-correct. We're not getting into all the things, unless this is a repeated offense. So I want to ask you, those of you who are watching, how do you usually handle quick check-ins versus like a longer conversation? If you have a kid that's blurting out in class, what do you say? What are you doing? How do you check that behavior without it actually disrupting the longevity of the lesson or even the class? The second thing is really recognizing the impact. So I want to guide my students to think about who is affected. You blurting out in class, or you talking too much, or you being disrespectful, whatever. Who is the person that's affected? It's not just about you. It's about the community around you. And if you watch my last video, you know that my classroom runs on community, right? And so even for minor incidents, this can be something as simple as pointing out the consequences. When we interrupt, it affects everyone's learning, right? When you're blurting out or narrating your life, you're interrupting Susie over here who's still working on the problem. I always tell my students, even when we're moving, transitions in my classroom are silent. And so they are silent because you don't know if Susie is still trying to remember what does she need to get out of her book bag, or what does she need for class to get ready, or if the other person's still working. when we are silent, we literally minimize the opportunity to disrupt our neighbor, thus causing chaos in our classroom. Okay. And so even for major incidents, this might involve a short discussion. I'll get into my behavior plan in a little later, just so you can see. I even have a form that they fill out if this is a repeated offense or if this is a major incident, so that they can actually have time to sit and reflect and look through and think about the things. So I want to ask you, before we go to the next thing, what strategies have you used to help your students recognize the impact of their actions without taking the whole class period? Sometimes when we focus on the correction of a student, we actually take away from the class period as a whole. But how do you help your students recognize the impact of their actions, not just skip directly to consequences? Is that something that we're doing in our classrooms, or is that something that we've missed? So finally, what can we do to make it right? So this is where I'll bring in my behavior plan for you guys to see. So for minor issues, a simple apology may suffice. Maybe correcting the behavior is enough. If you're blurting out in class, simply close your mouth. Like, that's how you can make that right. But for bigger issues, then yes, there does need to be a restorative conversation. Maybe there is a note of apology. Maybe you do need to apologize to the classroom, depending on how big or whatever the case is, and I allow the student to select what that looks like. Again, there's a list in my behavior plan in the reflective form where it gives them ideas, but I allow them to come up with, how do you think you can make this right? How do you think you can correct this? So I keep alluding to the behavior plan. Let me just show it to you, okay? All right, so this is a copy of my behavior plan. This is something that the parents received at open house. This is also something that every student has received that we went over. And so it goes through all the details of the plan. They start with a gentle reminder, then a redirect or reteach, which is through a private conversation. And then the third thing is what we're going to talk about is having a short break, so they can calm down and reflect. This is where they come to this make it right reflection sheet. And so on this sheet, they answer the same questions that we would have had in conversation, or how some of those things would have come up. Number 1, what happened? Number 2, who was affected? Number 3, what classroom expectation was broken? And so these are the 3 things that we focus on in class. And so which one of these expectations were broken, or were all 3 of these expectations broken? And then number 4, what could I have done differently? And so this gives them a chance to reflect, not just on what I did poorly, but how should I have actually handled that situation? And then number 5 is where we go into, how can I make it right? Okay. And so this is where I give them a list of ideas or examples. So if you used it, return it or clean it, whatever the case is. If this is not applicable, or this is really as they get started, so they have an idea of what to do. But then this is where I also want them to, my idea to make it right. So what are you choosing to do? And then what's your plan for next time? The student signs this, and then the teacher signs it, and we all get a copy. I also put this into their actual notes in their folder, so that their parents have a copy of it. And we all are aware of what's happened, and we all are aware of what's taking place. Now, if I have a kid that is doing this excessively, no, they're not going to fill out this form every single time something happens. But if it is excessive, then the very next thing on our plan is that we go to communicating with parents and even an office referral, because at that point, it's not a question of if you understand, the expectation. You understand the expectation. We have talked about correction and corrective matters. You have made a commitment of how you're going to do better, and you still are not doing that. And so now at this point, there is a refusal to change. And so this is where, all the things. Okay, so my behavior plan, actually, the reason I did this way is because I want to focus on connection first. I want to build relationships daily, so the students want to do the right thing, so that they care about how I feel about the situation, or even how their classroom feels. And so relationships are a big part of our classroom. The second thing is those restorative conversations. When we ask what happened, who was affected, it is a time sensitive way of having a conversation, but also it forces them to understand the impact and also talk about, how do I make it better, right? And then number 3, is a natural and logical consequences. So the students learn that actions have results and they need to take responsibility for their action. Every action that you have. I even taught cause and effect from my behavior plan. Like, you have a cause. Your negative behavior was a cause. What is the effect? How does it affect the people in the room? How does it affect you? How does it affect our learning environment? All the things so that we all have an understanding, not just of what we're doing wrong, but the results, and we take responsibility of all of the effects or all of the consequences that follow. And then, of course, lastly, a reflection and ownership. So I have also seen that when students have an opportunity to journal and they have an opportunity to be pulled out of that situation to think it through, and even with short discussions, it actually helps them to process what they learned, and it helps to stick with them longer. And you get to actually see the longevity and growth as opposed to just a quick correction in terms of not wanting to get in trouble. And so basically my plan keeps everything consistent without requiring every incident to become lengthy. Like, we don't have to have a conversation about everything that's going on. I gave you an initial reminder and then we had a conversation. After that conversation, I'm bringing you the form. Like, we're done talking. We've talked about this. Also, what I've learned is you have to empower not just your students to make good decisions and good choices, but empower yourself. If your students are not responding to your behavioral plan or they are lacking respect for the system is flawed and needs to be changed, right? And so for me, how that showed up is when I would go straight to a conversation with a student, because you've been talking too much every day this week and it's Thursday. So no, you're not getting a reminder. We're going straight to conversation and you can fill out my form, my boy. My student, their rebuttal was, but I didn't get a warning. And so they start manipulating my system and they wanted a warning because the warning is the time that they would use to start then correcting. Does that make sense? And so if that's the case, I emailed the parents, I emailed my admin and said, hey, we're making an adjustment to the behavior plan because the students are abusing the warning piece of our plan. And so going forward, there will be no warnings. We are going straight to conversations because I am aware that they are aware of the expectation. And they are so aware of the expectation that they're beginning to abuse the behavior plan. Your kids are much smarter than you give them credit for. And so you have to make the necessary changes. Even for busy teachers, you can implement this kind of plan and see results immediately, especially when the expectations for the classroom are clear. My last point that I want to give to you, and then we're going to go. But over time, these practices used correctly as far as the restorative classroom culture, you start to see a classroom culture where respect, responsibility, and empathy are a part of their everyday life. You start seeing this in how they handle each other. You start seeing this at recess on the playground, how they begin to mingle and they begin to actually resolve conflict, and everyone's not running to the teacher for you to mediate and to help. Students actually start doing the right thing because it matters, not just to you, but to them. And not because they're getting a reward for it. They're not looking for a treasure box. They're looking at because I feel good when I do the right thing and when I do what's expected of me. So I want to ask you guys that are watching, how do you foster respect and empathy in your classroom without relying on rewards? I would love to hear your strategies. What's working for you? What things have you done that were an epic failure that did not work before? And then lastly, if you want, I can share some of the simple restorative routines and things that I have used that you can start using tomorrow in your classroom, even for a busy classroom, to help you build this kind of culture. Just give me a note. I would love to share that with you. Again, as always, thank you so much for watching. Do not forget to like, subscribe, share, hit the bell, all the things, okay? So you don't miss the next video. I'm gonna dive a little deeper into practical examples of these restorative routines that I've talked about actually in action. Actually in action. So as always, this is your girl Patrice, and I'm keeping it real, but most importantly, I'm keeping it teacherish. So you make sure you stay tuned. You don't wanna miss what's coming next. See you next time, guys.